Welcome back in, everybody. This is the 21 off season, and we are looking at the Kansas City Chiefs. If you're watching today, you're obviously either a Chiefs fan or you are really a nerd like I am, and you love to just nerd out over all these numbers that we're going to put out today. I could literally put up 4 walls worth of numbers to cover what we're going to talk about today. I've tried to limit all of those numbers. I know some of you don't like numbers at all. Some of you are better at numbers than I am. I've tried to limit the numbers today to just the significant ones that we really need to deal with. So we're going to ramble a little bit. It's going to be a little bit sloppy today, but we will eventually, I promise, get you down to a set of numbers that makes sense and that is clear. Okay, so first of all, we're going to talk about the salary cap in general. So if you hang with me for about 2 or 3 minutes, we've got to find out about where the salary cap is going to be this year. And that'll take about 2 or 3 minutes for me to get to. And then we'll narrow it down to Kansas City specifically for the rest of the video. $209 million. That was going to be the projected cap number for all NFL teams before COVID hit and before the revenues went down. Now, I know someone out there is going to say, Ben, I heard it was going to be 225 or 230. And in all reality, it was just never going to be that. Every offseason, I get a couple of guys tell me that they hear that the salary cap is just going to jump and going to explode, and it just doesn't do that. It's only done that twice in 3 decades now since the salary cap era started. That was in 1998 when the new TV deals kicked in, and that was in 2006, again, when some new TV deals kicked in. The cap just does not do that. Again, I think in 2014, interestingly enough, it didn't jump that much. So we've never, ever seen the cap jump that much for no reason without TV deals kicking in. And the last time the TV deals did kick in, it didn't jump by that much. So if you heard 225 or 230, I'm sure you heard that from somewhere, but that's largely speculation. Most of the guys that we hear reporting on this kind of information, this is the Mike Florio's, the Adam Schefters, the websites like Spot Track or Over the Cap, most of the people who deal with this kind of stuff, or they have inside contacts inside the NFL, they're not giving you the number of 225 or 230. The number was somewhere in the ballpark of 208, 209, 210, 207. It was somewhere right in there before COVID. Now, all of you know that COVID has changed everything. The new number that most of you probably have heard of, most common number, is 175 million. Now, that number came back in August. That was a publicly announced, agreed upon number by the Players Union and the NFL that NFL teams would not be allowed to spend less than $175 million per team during the 2021 offseason. Okay, so that's the number that we had to work with. That is bedrock right there. You can stand on that all day long. That is a fact. $175 million. Now, the latest number that we got from a lot of the sources that we like to rely on, this isn't just Facebook gossip or speculation from radio talk show hosts. This is the latest number that we got from people who like to keep up with this sort of thing and whose careers are basically built on giving us this kind of information, was $180 million. We started hearing that about the first or second week of December from a lot of different print media sources who consistently put out numbers on this kind of thing. So it was pretty much quiet from August to December. In early December, we started hearing that maybe the cap number might go to $180 million. And then even just today, a few hours ago, I heard that it might hit $185 million. So the truth is, nobody really knows where the cap is going to be. I don't think the NFL people for sure themselves know. I think if they did know, they would already be telling their teams about it. So we don't know for sure. I don't know. Nobody else knows for sure. The number we're working with today is $180 million because that's the last number we were getting in the first week of December from people who consistently report on this kind of stuff and who are pretty reliable about coming up with real numbers, not just wild speculation kind of numbers. $180 million is the number we're working with today. Let's talk about Kansas City specifically. They've got $5 million that they can roll over from 2020 to add to this $180 million. So for Kansas City, the number wouldn't be 180, it would be $185 million. And that's the number we're working with today. I am sure that that number will change, either go lower or higher as we proceed through the months of February and March. So when we get that new number, me and everybody else in the NFL circles will deal with that new number. But for today, it's $180 million plus $5 million rolled over from the Chiefs specifically that they have to bring over from 2020 season. So that leaves you with, and this is the number we want to get to right here, $29 million after we take out this number. Now, what is this number right here? This number is $156 million. This is how much money the Chiefs have already spent on their top 9 players right now. Who are those 9 players? These guys right here. All the way from Frank Clark and Patrick Mahomes down to Eric Fisher, Anthony Hitchens, and Mitchell Schwartz. Those top 9 players for Kansas City right now in 2021 have cap hits that come together to equal $156 million. So we know already, and again, this is bedrock here. This is facts that we're going to be able to work off of and build off of. $156 million of cap space has already been devoted to these 9 players right here. Nobody else in the roster is counted right here in this number. Just those 9 players collectively have cap hits. They are all in order. Starting with Frank Clark, he'll have the biggest cap hit for Kansas City in 2021. He'll be somewhere around $25.9 million, I think, right around $26 million, give or take. You go all the way down to number 9 on the list, and that's Mitchell Schwartz. I think he checks in at about $10.5 million, give or take 100,000. That's where Mitchell Schwartz is. Everybody else is in between that, in between 10.5 and about $26 million. Those are the 9 guys put together. They have $156 million in cap space between them already before Kansas City does anything else this offseason. So, working with the 185 that I talked about, I told you how I came to that 185, and subtracting out the 156, that leaves us with this number here, $29 million. $29 million for the other 42 players on the roster. Now, if some of you are starting to do some quick math here, I'm not going to debate about a 51-man roster versus a 53-man roster and how that works. Today, we're working with a 51-man roster for salary cap purposes, okay? $29 million left for 42 other players that you have to fill out the roster. So $156 million goes to these 9 guys right here, and that leaves you with, based on the numbers we're operating off of, $29 million for the other 42 guys. To better illustrate that, I want to show you with the dollar amounts right here. I've got 27 pieces up here. I don't want to literally put $200 bills up here on the board, but I've got 27 here. So if we were going to pay $156 million to those 9 guys, what would be left for everybody else? Basically looks like this. Just to get it in better proportions so you can see it better. That basically is the amount of money that is being given to these 9 players right here, and the 4 that are left, these four bills right here, that is basically what is available for the other 42 players on the roster in terms of percentages. So all of this money is getting paid to the 9 guys, and these 4 bills right here are getting paid to the other 42 players on the roster. Now, is that a number we can work with? How much should the other players on the roster be making? Are the guys that we still have on the roster already making more than that? Well, if you take this $29 million and you divide it by the 42 players, that gives you another number that we like to work with right here. $690,000. Again, that's for the 42 players who are left. Divide the $29 million that is left among those 42 players, and you get this number right here, $690,000. And that is basically, more or less, that is basically the absolute lowest amount of money you can make and be on an NFL roster. Take aside the practice squad guys for a minute. They don't count in this conversation. But if you are an undrafted rookie free agent, your cap hit for the season will be somewhere in the neighborhood of $690,000. If you were drafted in rounds 5, 6, or 7, your cap hit will be somewhere in the neighborhood of $690,000. Okay, so if you are a league veteran, you've been in the league for a handful of seasons, and you were injured last year, and you just want somebody to pick you up, you're going to make more than 690. You're going to be up somewhere around 850, 950. I forget the actual number. It's going to be a little bit more than that. So this right here, you cannot pay a player. This is important. Just because you want to talk a guy into it, you cannot pay a player to play for you for $100,000 this year. The league will not allow it. The players union will not allow it. It is not allowed. This right here, number we've come up with is $690,000. It is the lowest you could pay any player. So if you keep these 9 players at $156 million and you divide what you have left between the other 42 spots on the roster, you have the absolute league minimum for what you can pay anybody else on the roster. Okay, so that would basically mean you have 9 guys making $156 million. Everybody else on the roster is basically an undrafted free agent, a 5th round pick, a 6th round pick, a 7th round pick. That is basically what you have. So brings up a lot of questions. Okay, we're gonna try to work through these in quick order so the video isn't too long. All right, what if I want to sign my draft class? Do I have enough money to do that? And the answer is not the 1st and 2nd rounders. You should be able to sign the 5th, the 6th, the 7th, any undrafted rookie free agents you want to bring in. You have enough money to do that. You don't have enough to sign your 1st and 2nd round draft picks, basically. What if I want to sign all of my free agents? The Kansas City Chiefs have a ton of significant free agents this offseason, and I'm not going to list them here. That's a totally separate video. What if I want to re-sign one of my guys whose contract is up? Again, this money here does not allow for that. There's not enough money for that. Again, the 42 players, the 42 slots left on the roster, it only allows for basically this league minimum right here. What if I want to go out in free agency and, get somebody at linebacker or somebody at CB or somebody at fill in the blank position? There's no money for that either, okay? Based on what we have right now, before we do anything to the cap, this is what you have: $690,000 for each of the 42 slots that are left. So basically, you've got 9 guys that you feel deserve a whole boatload of money, and then you have 40 other 2 slots that are making the absolute lowest league minimum, which isn't veterans minimum. It's just undrafted free agents and 5th, 6th, 7th round type of draft picks. Okay, so how do I get more money? What if I want to do these things? What if I want to sign my 1st and 2nd round draft pick, which of course I'm going to do? What if I want to re-sign some of my guys? What about the guys I already have on the roster? The Kansas City already has 5 or 6 guys who are already on the roster, like your kicker, 2 of your running backs, 1 of your guards who are already making $2 million, $2.5 million, $4 million. We don't yet, before we manipulate the cap any, we don't yet have any money for them either. So we've got some cap manipulation to do. Where do I get money from? Okay, how do I get the cap space to do all of these normal things that I would normally do during a normal NFL offseason? And there are basically 2 ways to do it. One of the ways that you cannot do it is to have a rich owner come in and throw lots of extra money. Now, personally, if it was me, I would love to see the NFL. I wish they had done this. They're not going to do this. I wish the NFL had just allowed this to be an uncapped year, just a completely uncapped season. And I know that opens up a whole Pandora's box of things for the league to deal with, and they don't like dealing with Pandora's boxes, okay? But I would personally have loved to have seen this be an uncapped season, because it is such an unusual year. And what that would allow it to do, what it would allow teams to do, if you have a rich owner like a Jerry Jones or like a couple of other guys in the league who are just filthy rich, it would allow them to dig into their own pockets past normal league revenues for a season and just basically pay any player any amount they wanted to pay for one season, either on a 1-year contract or through some extra bonus money for that 1 year. Now, again, I understand they're not going to do that. The NFL hates that. They did that a few years ago. Washington and Dallas both got in trouble for doing things that the league did not approve of. Okay, the league does not like dealing with that. They like to have it all controlled, and so I understand this is not going to happen. But it would have been a lot of fun to see the top 10 NFL owners, the top 10 richest NFL owners, dig into their own pockets. And I think the players' union would have liked that, because a lot of the players would still be getting a lot of the big contracts, or at least they would be making a lot of money in one season. So that's not going to happen. I wish it would have happened, but that brings us back to what we've got right here. How do I get the money? The 2 ways are this. You either let go of somebody on the list. it can only be one of these 9. Nobody else in the roster is making enough to count worth a hoot. It can only be one of these 9. You let go of one of these players, and now you have more cap space to use on the 42 slots left, or you start restructuring. Now, Kansas City is not going to let go of any of these people here for different reasons. Some of them obvious. People like Mahomes, of course, they're not going to let go. They're not going to let go of Chris Jones. They just re-signed him. They're not going to let go of Travis Kelce, of course. They're not going to let go of Tyreek Hill for obvious reasons, talent-wise, age-wise, whatever-wise. There's no chance they're going to let go of any of those players and get more cap space for the remaining 42 slots. What about a guy like Anthony Hitchens? Not the best linebacker in the world. Could we let him go? He's making about $11 million this season. Actually, I think it's $12 million cap hit this season. You could let him go, but you wouldn't be saving any money. I think you save about $2 million, even if you were to use the PJ1 cut, the P61 cut on Anthony Hitchens. That would only let you save about $4 to $5 million, maybe $6 million this offseason, but you'd still have about $5 or $6 million on the books next year for Hitchens. So no matter what, you've still got to pay Hitchens $12 million against the cap, even if he's not on the roster. So Hitchens can't be let go. There are only 3 guys that you can let go, and that is Mitchell Schwartz, Eric Fisher, and Tyrann Mathieu. And again, there's absolutely no chance on any planet in any way that Kansas City is going to let go of their right tackle, their left tackle, or their basically all-pro defensive back there with Tyrann Mathieu. So the option of letting go of a player who's making a whole bunch of money in order to spread that money over the last 42 slots on the roster is just flat out not going to happen. Kansas City made these decisions right here that you're looking at in 2019 and in 2020. They have decided that this is their core group. That's kind of a term that you'll hear a lot of times all over the NFL. They've identified their core group of players that they are not going to let go of, that they are going to try to win with, and this is that core group. We know it's their core group because these are the guys making a boatload of money. Okay, so these are the 9. No, none of these guys is going to go, I don't think. It would shock me in all the pieces if Kansas City decides to let go of any of these 9 guys. Again, only 3 of them would save you any money. The other 6 all have dead cap numbers so high that it really wouldn't be worth it. The 3 that would be worth it would be Mathieu, Fisher, and Schwartz, and there's just no way they're going to let go of any of those 3 guys. So option number 1, we let go of 1 player or 2 players to free up some cap space. Probably just not going to happen. The other option is this, and this is the one that has been trending in the NFL for the past 10 years, basically ever since the rookie salary cap got in place about a decade ago, a little bit less than a decade ago, and that is the restructure. Okay, it is the magic restructure card. Okay, Philadelphia has used this more than anybody over the last 3 seasons. And by the way, when Kansas City makes their roster this top heavy in terms of finances, they're taking a path that a few other teams have actually taken before. One of those teams is Philadelphia. For the last 3 seasons has taken a path that looks just like this. Another one of those teams is the Pittsburgh Steelers. Not so much the past 2 or 3 seasons, but for most of the 2010s, the Pittsburgh Steelers have operated with a financial structure that looks a lot like that. The Indianapolis Colts, for most of the 2000s, operated off of a cap structure that looked a lot like this. The Seattle Seahawks, for a couple, 2, 3 years, 4 years after their Super Bowl appearances, used a financial structure that looks a lot like this. It's incredibly top-heavy. It is massive amounts of money being sent to the top 8 to 10, 12 players. You say, Ben, isn't that normal? And the answer is no. Most NFL teams do not operate this way. What happens with most NFL teams, they simply do not have enough good players on the roster to be getting even paid this kind of money. Most NFL teams, it kind of goes to this pattern. They are trying to draft and free agent their way into a team that's good enough to compete for a Super Bowl. Once you get that, teams and franchises really, really, really want to nail down that core group of players and not let that core group go anywhere. So once that core group of players, that's the term you hear all the time, Once they get off their rookie contracts, then they start getting market kind of contracts. And if they're not full market contracts, they're pretty close with some kind of a team discount. And that is what you get right here. Okay, so Kansas City is following a path that a few other NFL teams have gotten. And usually it's good teams who have had good drafts, and by some combination of a lot of skill and a little bit of luck, they've gotten some excellent players on their roster. And now those rookie contracts are up, and they want to pay those guys, and they don't want to let these guys go. Okay, so this is the path that Kansas City is traveling down, and these are the decisions that they made in 2019 and 2020 to keep these players and to give these players this kind of money. Now, back to our original question. If I want to sign my rookie draft class, and of course I do, and if I want to re-sign some of my own free agents, and of course I do, and if I dare to dip my toe into free agency this year, what do I do? And the thing that teams have done over the past decade is this right here. It's called restructuring. Basically, what it means is, for NFL teams, I'm going to take some of the money from 2021, because I just don't have enough to go around for my roster this year, and I'm going to put it on the future seasons. Now, in reality, what they're doing is they're going to a player and they say, hey, how would you like to have your cash for this season up front? We're going to convert your base salary into signing bonus, and that allows us, from an accounting perspective, to spread that over the next several years of your contract. And the player says, sure, I'm not losing anything. As a matter of fact, because it creates more dead money in the future, you're more likely to keep me around. So the player really doesn't get more money out of it. He definitely doesn't get less money out of it. It's just accounted differently. You're taking that money and you're applying it to future seasons. Okay, so restructuring has become very popular in the NFL for good teams who have a lot of players that they're trying to keep and they don't want to watch let go. So Pittsburgh had done a lot of that. Nobody's done it more than Philadelphia over the past 3 seasons. Philadelphia has done it and done it and done it and done it and gone back and restructured some players some more. Okay, and that's what Kansas City is left with. There's no choice if they're going to keep these guys, and I think they are. There's no choice, but they're going to have to restructure some of these guys right here. Now, how much restructuring are they going to do, and how much restructuring is a good idea? That depends on what all you want to do. If you just want to restructure for enough money to get your draft class together and put the rest of the roster with basically undrafted free agents and guys who are already on the roster, you're probably going to need somewhere around $15 million, give or take a couple million, maybe 15 to $18 million, something like that, which means I go to Patrick Mahomes, and I go to Frank Clark, and I go to Chris Jones, and I talk to them, and I restructure their contracts, and it's not hurting them any, it's not helping them much either, but it's helping the Chiefs in 2021. That $15 to $18 million, does it just disappear? No, it goes on to the contracts, the cap hits for 2021 and 22 and 23, which means that my burdens get a little bit heavier in 2022 and 23 and 24. So there's a price to pay. You can think of the restructuring just like a credit card, because that's about how it works. I don't want to pay for this today. I don't want to pay for these guys completely today, so I'm going to pay for them tomorrow. I don't want to pay for them in 2021, so I'm going to pay for them in 2022, and 23, and 24, and 25. Is that going to hurt me? Well, it depends on how much I do. You probably won't notice $15 to $18 million restructuring over the next 3 to 4 seasons. It will really not be that big of a deal. Now, what if I want to re-sign some of my own guys? And again, I'm not going through the list today. It's too big of a list. It's too in-depth. And I just don't have those numbers together. But if any of the guys whose contracts are up for this season, and there's a lot of them, if I want to keep them around, let's say I have a linebacker or a defensive back, and he's going to cost me about $5 million to re-sign, I'm going to have to restructure another $5 million out of one of these guys. Okay, so that means instead of the 15 to 18 that we already talked about, I'm now going to move that to 18 to 20 million dollars. If I have 2 guys that I desperately want to re-sign just to keep my Super Bowl winning team together, my Super Bowl competing team together, then that would be another $5 million or another $8 million, which starts to move me up to $25 to $30 million that I'm adding on to future seasons, 21, 22, 23. If I dare to re-sign 4 of my own players, because I just don't want to see that many people walk away from my roster, and I get into free agency, say for one player who's going to run $8 to $10 million, right there you're starting to look at a good solid $40 million, easily $40 million to re-sign about 4 guys, get my draft class together, keep the guys on the roster who are already signed in 21 to larger amounts than this 690, and bring in a free agent. You're easily looking at $40 million to do that kind of thing. And that $40 million can't be on 21 because we don't have any more space in 21. It's going to go on 2022, 23, and 24, those seasons. So it just adds a heavier burden. So basically, I'm gonna about finish with this. If you can reimagine these dollar amounts for a future season, instead of what we just looked at it for, I'm gonna show these dollar amounts for a different purpose. I already have this amount of money for 2021, and say, well, I don't want to spend this amount of money on these players. I'm going to put it on a future year. So I take a $4 or $5 million and I put it over here on 2022. I want to sign a free agent. So here's another $4 or $5 million. Goes on to 2022, 2023, 24. I want to re-sign 4 of my guys instead of just 2 of them. Well, that's more money that I'm taking off of the 21 cap and I'm putting onto the 2022 caps, 2023 caps, 2024 caps. Okay, so this is the price that you pay when you restructure. Now, just so I can keep a little bit of my independence, a little bit of my personal integrity here, this is not my preferred route. I am not criticizing Kansas City for doing this. I'm not criticizing Philadelphia for having done it so much. This is not the way I would do it. I do not believe in a high-end salary structure and in restructuring to create space for a given season. It's just not my way. And that's not my idea. I completely stole that idea off of somebody else. I'm not going to say who, because I don't want other people figuring this out for what it's worth. And the answer is yes, I am obnoxious enough and arrogant enough to think that I have a better way in my head than this right here, okay? And I get it. Listen, I have the utmost, total, complete respect for Brett Veach and Andy Reid for their ability to draft, for their ability to, in particular, pick out Patrick Mahomes in the draft, for their ability to see during that first season what Mahomes could be, for their ability to have the stones to let Alex Smith go and install Mahomes as the starter, for their ability to build an offense around Mahomes, for the ability to continue to draft in the secondary on defense, and to draft in a couple of other spots, for their ability to rework the interior offensive line without any steady flow of draft picks. I have a ton of respect for them, but this is different. This is new. This is the crossroads that good teams, upper tier teams, come to financially, where they have to decide, do we start letting some of these guys go, or do we keep giving them more money? Because again, this isn't about making the team better. This is simply about keeping the same roster intact. And you don't even get to do that. We're going to watch Kansas City say goodbye to several free agents during this offseason. This is exclusively about one thing, keeping that core group together that we've identified as the players we can't win without. And I certainly am not criticizing Kansas City or Philadelphia or anybody else, Pittsburgh, for doing that. I am simply saying it's not my way. I would have a very much different way of building the roster at this point. And on the flip side, when I truly say I respect these guys, I do. I don't have the ability to draft like they do. I've never sat down and studied college players to the extent they have to draft that way. But when it comes to the money I understand, and the money I have a pretty good handle on. This is not the way I would do it, but this is the way Kansas City is doing it. And I can't wait, honestly, we have never seen a team, ever. We have never seen a team with this much of a top-end balance on the roster financially, continue to compete for Super Bowls year in and year out. But we've also never seen a team with Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes and Eric Bieniemy if he stays, and Steve Spagnuolo, and with Chris Jones and with Tyrann Mathieu on it. So there's a very good chance, there's every chance that Kansas City can win a lot of games next season. I fully expect them to win a lot of games next season, and a very good chance for Kansas City to be back in the Super Bowl next year. It just gets harder. And you start to see the difficulties here. It just gets more difficult as you begin to put more money into fewer players. You just have less money to spread around to other players. And I know somebody's telling me right now, they're screaming at me over the video, we're going to build through the draft. And that's, Kansas City may very well do that. That's a conversation for another day. This is enough. The video is way too long. If you're still listening, thank you so much. We'll talk to you later. Goodbye.